for an inclusive global transition to a circular economy with a roadmap plan. And so if we go to the apologies, maybe before I start. So during the World Circular Economy Forum these few days, what we've heard a lot is that the circular economy to be successful requires a global approach. We've also heard that it needs to be linked to just transitions and it needs to be inclusive. And that's also very much in line with what our thinking is for this global roadmap process. And so what we're not intending this roadmap to be is, it's not supposed to be a top-down process that will place new obligations on governments or private sector or other actors. And it's meant to be complementary. It's not supposed to be in conflict or competition with other initiatives. It's supposed to be complementary. And the final aspect was nothing like this has been done yet, so it's not replicating something that's already underway. So if we go to the next slide, please. So one rationale for this global roadmap approach has been also what we've observed over the last few years is a proliferation of national circular economy roadmaps. And we've heard this also during the last 2 days. There's a lot of talk about this. And what we've heard many times also from governments who've been doing these roadmaps is, how does that connect what we do on national level to the international level? And so that's a gap that we've identified. And hopefully we can address that through the initiative that we're launching. Over to the next slide, please. So the rationale and the objectives that we're pursuing with this is threefold. First of all, we want to develop a global vision, a shared vision, a high-level picture of where we want the circular economy to be in, for example, 2030 or 2040. That's quite a high-level approach, and we're going to start with this. The next step will be to identify some essential areas for international collaboration. And these have also been discussed over the last few days, and we've also identified some of these, including issues around global trade, finance, policy coordination, but also maybe value chain or sectoral approaches. But as we go along with the roadmap, we plan to become more specific on these topics. And the third aspect is also, we want to increase the ambition that we see. We already see a lot of ambition over the last few days, but I think with the more global approach that we're promoting, and we can even raise that further to adequately address the triple planetary crisis, but also issues around sustainable development in the SDG context. So then next slide, please. So the question, who is involved? As I mentioned, we engaged with stakeholders, and over the last few months, we put together a group of very supportive organizations, which we have now called the Executive Committee. You can see the organizations here on the slide. And we've engaged quite closely in the run-up to this process, and some of them are here today. Also, they'll be speaking on the panel shortly. And so we've also now launched an open process where we, just 2 weeks ago actually, when we also advertised for this session today, we've opened a forum where organizations from across the world could express their interest in joining this initiative. And so far we've received 170 organizations that have signed up. And actually, we had to update these slides every day because there's more and more coming on. And we hope also that after the session today, there will be also more organizations joining. And this includes organizations from, as I said, from across the world, but also from private sector, governments, ministries, private sector, academia, science institutions, civil society. So quite a broad spectrum. Okay, for the next slide then, I hand over to Jack.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Hi, everyone. It's also, just before I dive into this, it's really encouraging to see in the very last session of these 3 days that it's a full room. That's really encouraging to us. So thank you for coming and listening right at the end. So as Patrick said, there's a wide range of organizations showing a keen interest in being involved in this, but how can we actually structure this that's a way that maintains inclusivity, but keeps us moving forward in an objective way and gives objective outcomes. So something that Chatham House does a lot as a global neutral convener on kind of global challenges. We employ things like the backcasting process, which is what we're suggesting for this process. Backcasting is really quite a simple process. You start looking forward. So phase one for this roadmap would be co-designing and developing a vision for what an inclusive circular economy could be. Without a vision, there's a risk we all keep moving in opposite directions. So once we have a vision, we move to phase two, which is first really understanding the current landscape and the complexity of all the initiatives, areas of development, activities at the domestic, local, regional levels all around the world, and really understand the trends that are emerging. And then identifying key pathways forward to reach that vision. And these pathways are areas for mutual collaboration and mutual gain. So the key, and as Patrick said at the start, it's not about trying to dictate a specific action that every country should take. It's recognizing mutual autonomy, and every country does take a different direction in the circular economy depending on their context. But there are key areas that we need to collaborate on if everyone is actually going to achieve that. And then phase three, which is longer term going 2025 and beyond, is actually starting to work through those pathways through objective initiatives and also supporting existing initiatives that align with those pathways. So just the next slide, please. So I won't cover the other phases, but for phase one, around developing a shared vision, essentially, we would seek to have a vision summer coming this coming summer. Patrick will tell you more details about how that will come about. But the actual visioning process itself, we envisage a series of online workshops, 2 or 3 workshops, bringing in voices from all around the world, as broad and diverse perspectives as we can get, working towards a vision, and then holding in-person kind of final session, really pulling it all together with as broad a community and representative stakeholders as we can. And Chatham House would kind of play the neutral convener there, bringing in also all the different organizations in this room and listening online that have the specific expertise to deliver at certain points in these workshops. We would kind of hand over to them. What's the benefits of the vision? Well, as Patrick said, this roadmap's not supposed to compete with other initiatives. In fact, if we can develop a really robust and objective vision for what an inclusive and equitable circular economy is in a really clear and objective way, then that can feed in and support already existing initiatives. And so it really complements these ongoing initiatives. But it also, having that informs future dialogue, particularly at the multilateral level, as the circular economy really starts to pick up in that space. If we have a clear vision for that in the next few years, then that sets the scene early for those discussions to take place. And then there's the third benefit, which is always undervalued, but we think really gives the most value, the actual process itself, and bringing such a diverse group of stakeholders together just to discuss what inclusivity and equity is in a global circular economy, we think is incredibly valuable. And yeah, that's value in and of itself. So that'd be phase one. Patrick, I'll pass back to you for the next slide.
Yes, next slide, please. And yeah, for phase one, we've worked out a very specific timeline and activities and milestones that we want to achieve in 2023. So you can see we're here in December 22. We're planning to host the first visioning online workshop with the stakeholders. Then after that, in the middle of next year, we plan to have an in-person visioning workshop. And we're going to plan to do this back-to-back with the next World Circular Economy Forum in Helsinki. So that's the idea. And we've had some initial discussions with Citra. Also, the objectives are complementary. And so there's this now more natural also merging with the stakeholder community of the World Circular Economy Forum happening. Then another online workshop following the in-person meeting, and then we're aiming for an important milestone. So we want to have the outcomes of this visioning process documented, together with recommendations that we would like to present to the UN at the SDG summit that will take place in September. So that's what we're working towards, some specific output, specific recommendations, especially in view of how the circular economy can contribute to the next few years or so of SDG implementation, 2030. And the vision probably takes us also beyond that for what maybe comes after the SDGs. So that's where we're at the moment. And now, that's enough from our side. We're now going to have some, if we go to the next slide, interventions and contributions from a number of participants. And the first one I would like to invite is Madam Paula Francisco, who's the Secretary of State for Climate Action and Sustainable Development from the government of Angola. And Madam Paula is at the moment, she's joining us from Canada, where she's attending the COP15 on biodiversity. Hope you can hear us. If we can switch now to the Zoom, and please welcome Madam Paula for her opening remarks to our session today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me very well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. So unfortunately, I'm not in Canada because we are hosting now the home for 3 continents, 1 oceans with the African, Caribbean, and Pacific. We are discussing issues from the forum, from youth, from business, from circular economy, development, agriculture, and many other subjects that entails. So, but I would like to thank you for joining this important World Circular Economic Forum session. Today's panel will discuss how we can create a more joined up and inclusive transition to circular economy. My message today is global and inclusive transition to the circular economy. So since the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, the countries of the world have been negotiating treaties on climate, biodiversity, and desertification. Today, I join you from Rwanda, where I'm representing the government also in the negotiations. Nevertheless, we are hosting the forum, but we're also dealing with issues on how we can assure and approach the new global biodiversity framework. So we are connected with you there in Kigali and the others worldwide that they are also joining us, not only from the ground, but also on the platform. Why we should address the transition looking at the global and relevant matters for circular economy. So we do believe that this forum that is taking place in Kigali is really happening at the time that circular economy is an action, this action is accelerating worldwide. Governments such as Angola across the world are already beginning to set up national plans, regulations, roadmaps, and targets for national circular economy development. Angola is also taking steps into the direction and exploring the opportunity of developing a national circular economy roadmap. We are at the beginning of our circular economy journey and exchanging experiences with other countries on CE and can be helped by accelerating policy development and its implementation. Companies in Angola export markets are setting targets to achieve higher decrease of resource efficiency and reduction of waste. For example, in the plastic sector, taxes on virgin plastics and corporative commitments to reduce plastic waste present to risk to Angola's economy, which is highly dependent on oil exports. Enable a just transaction to a circular economy is therefore an essential strategy for Angola business to diversify and remain competitive in the next century. At the same time, we are looking for a more inclusive and globally coordinated circular economy model. And these actions is accelerating worldwide. Like the circular economy transition needs to be all inclusive, giving due consideration to every country's different context and circumstances. Interpretations of what constitutes a circular economy varies from one nation to the other, which can be through collaboration on the topic that is already complicated. Angola's history and economic development makes its circular transition unique and different from that of other examples from where we are and from where you are. But we are all listening to the same time of terminology. Circular economy action is one country in one country can also be creating challenges and opportunities for fellow nations near and far away as a model. Material resources are extracted, transported, used, and wasted along complex global value chains. Therefore, stricter circular products design requirements for example, in Europe, all could create challenges for small and medium-sized entrepreneurs in Africa. For the circular economy to be relevant in all global contexts, the social and human development perspectives must be at the core of circular economy concept. For a low middle income nation like Angola, circular economy solutions can be improved the health of communities by ensuring safe management of waste, thus preventing pollution and disease. Moreover, if properly integrated into the cent work agenda, the circular economy could also create higher quality of jobs and livelihoods, as well as improve and affordable access to essential goods and services. Allow me to talk a little bit on the roadmap initiative. That is safe to say that circular economy transition is now becoming globally relevant. In fact, we at the government of Angola also have commenced our circular economy roadmap process with the Circular Innovation Lab. Similarly, over 50 nations have also embarked on the journey to develop a circular roadmap. For these circular economy roadmaps to succeed, they must be inclusive and connected. Against this background, I'm pleased to offer the keynotes today, which I also have some good points for this global circular economy roadmap initiative. In this, my proposal to you is that we need to achieve, firstly, that we all want to develop and share vision for an inclusive circular economy, looking that there is no collective common vision for an inclusive global circular economy transition at the moment. But if countries gathered behind a common vision and language, this could build trust, serve as an anchor point, and feed into our related multilateral processes and initiatives. Secondly, it needs to seek to identify and act on essential areas for mutual collaboration and coordination. Angola is bravely taking steps to become one of the first African nations with the Circular Economy Roadmap in close collaboration with Circular Innovation Lab. However, on its international and multilateral levels, there is no process or mechanism for us to integrate this Circular Economy Roadmap with the global partners. A global road mapping process will support knowledge exchange and identify areas where collaboration will deliver mutual benefits. Finally, the circular roadmap process could raise a global ambition for the circular economy. If we do convene both governments, business, civil society, and scientific community who are leading on circular economy planning and implementation, new alliances can be formed. This can enable ambitious actors to come forward and lead the way, identify areas for collective actions, and propose solutions that need to be advanced at the international level. So allow me to borrow also some words from my other colleagues that they were having interventions from the beginning. Like my dear colleague and friend Jian that said that circular economy represents the single greatest opportunity to supercharge green growth and job creation in Africa. Sharing experiences and learning from others in the transition to circular economy will be a key to its success also in Angola, Africa, and beyond. Therefore, I look forward for today's discussions, even though I'll be switch off my camera, but I'll be here till the end so that we commonly have a common ground for circular economy as Angola's initiatives are taking further steps on the circular journey. So I thank you for your kind attention and looking forward for the end of this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Francesco. Thank you very much for joining today and for your keynote speech and your support and also the recommendations that you put forward. This is all very valuable. Again, yeah, thank you very much. And yes, I hope you can stay for the rest of the session and also then exchange with the other participants who are here. Now I'd like to ask our next speaker, Stefan Siekers. Yeah, please come up here. And then, so Stefan from UNIDO is also one of the organizations that supported us over the last few months, engaging in our discussions how to move this forward.
Thank you. So, and thank you for having me. Now I'm seeing how full the room is. That is, of course, indeed a great sign for how well you hit the German word zeitgeist in proposing this roadmap. Yeah, I had to bring some German words in as a German. How well you hit the zeitgeist, because what we have seen here at the conference emerging, one of the themes I would say I saw in the conference was that there is more than an interest, that there is a field for a need for guidance on how to place all the many initiatives on different levels which are ongoing into an overall context which is actually moving in the right direction. A lot of things are happening, but at the moment the word cacophony has a negative connotation. That's, I would let's say, a positive cacophony. A lot of things are happening. Engagement is there, movement is there, things are moving forward, but how will it be? What will come first in the circular economy, globally speaking? Which countries, what is the condition for a country to be fast, for an industry, for a sector? All of that is still in the fog of the future. And I think a roadmap will be an excellent tool to advise a little bit on how to navigate that for all of us, no matter why we are here. So I find the roadmap, the concept of a roadmap, something which is per se intriguing, but even more so after seeing this conference and seeing the need for change and for movement without a clear direction what to do first and where to invest first and where to move first. I think a roadmap is an excellent answer for this set of challenges that we are facing. And I think we all want to do the same thing, which is we want to change the world, right? I can say that for us at UNIDO, I'm from United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Development is in our name. But what we want to do is we want to see that countries, actually all developing countries, move forward. And I think we have a good understanding that with circular economy, we can solve development issues, countries can move forward, and at the same time, environmental issues. And there are not many opportunities where you can combine these two. I can tell you that. So we are extremely excited. But in all what we are doing, we also in UNIDO face the challenges to find out where should we move first, when to start with what topic, how fast to move international cooperation, how fast to move national planning, how to arrange the different options that there are for action. And the roadmap would indeed be a great contribution to bringing some order into that and allowing all of us, in particular also us in UNIDO, to move forward. So what are the basic issues that I see that a roadmap might cover? Maybe I want to pick out three or so. I think it starts with the fact, who are the stakeholders? I think a roadmap will inevitably look a lot into the different stakeholder groups. There are many. I mean, here we had industries, we had NGOs of all kinds, from industry NGOs to consumer NGOs, all of these being extremely relevant, governments. And again, these stakeholders fall into different groups which want to accelerate it extremely, not accelerate it. So this mapping, I think, is very, very important. And then I think the next question is, what are actually the challenges that we see in front of us? And I think we talked about many, but I believe they fall into a multidimensional matrix, and we have to somehow get a hold on how to navigate that matrix. For example, we have industrial sectors, construction, textile, plastics. We have issues that were also raised here, like trade, standards, metrics, how to measure circular economy, how to measure advancement, how to measure what the circular economy product is, and how to trade them. Technologies, plenty of technologies combined with innovation. Where do we need innovation? Where are the gaps where we have nothing? Mapping would be very good also to show entrepreneurs opportunities. A lot of the entrepreneurship that I've seen is driven by material opportunities. Somewhere someone sees the waste, which is still of a high value, and converts it into a product. But we can go much further than that. There's much more music in circular economy. So this, including business model and government priorities, this matrix, I would say, would be very interesting to have. And then the next logical point would be sequencing. Well, let's say a suggestion for sequencing, because I think the roadmap will be almost, let's say, outdated 2 days after being published, simply because the world moves on quickly, but it still will give for a long period of time guidance and will have something that we can work on to update. And so I think the issue of sequencing is something that I'm sure we will get through in there as well. And for me, I'm coming from a multilateral organization. So the first thought I'm having always is, how do you get governments on board? Because that's essentially, no matter which multilateral organization, that's always our concerns. How do we get governments to go? And they're important stakeholders because they carry the framing which facilitates the economy and the circular economy in particular. So, but I think we had discussions before, and I think this is something how to get the governments on board and how to create processes and where their role is. And governments tend to want to have a leading role and not to be told what to do. But I think this can easily be, this can be accommodated in the roadmap. And we are very thrilled to be part of that process because, as I said, I believe it has huge strategic impact. We have to move in the transition to a circular economy. We have to move from this case-by-case thing and have to go to a really somewhat coordinated or at least cooperative broad approach where we all run in the same direction. And the roadmap will be an excellent tool to get us there.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That's really relevant suggestions and inputs. I mean, how to get governments involved and how to accommodate governments' needs and also use the leadership role that governments have in driving forward those international agendas. And that's definitely something we should discuss further. But also, I think you already touched upon what's the methodology when you talked about the matrix and the sequencing, and I think that's also quite relevant. How do we structure it in terms of the process? Okay, so thanks very much. Stay where you are. I think Jack, actually, I think you should join us up here too. But we now go back online because we have Claire Kasker-Cook, one of the directors of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And we've engaged over the last few months frequently as well. Claire, can you hear us?
I can hear you very well. So technology is working.
Thanks. Over to you.
Perfect. And thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Jack. And thank you especially to Madame Paula Francisco and also to Stephen for all your contributions and welcoming remarks. My name is Claire Kasker-Cook. I'm Director for Policy, Advocacy and Member Mobilization. In short, we call it PAM at WBCSD. And we have worked closely with Chatham House on the Global Circularity Roadmap and provided input, and we're proud for having done so. What we also have done, and this is what I wanted to briefly talk about because we've been getting quite a lot of questions. I was at a meeting earlier today, and it's
Claire, can you hear us? We just lost you. I think your video
I can hear you, and I can see myself. I can't. Your video is frozen. Can you see me? Hello? Hello?
See you online, Claire.
You can?
Yes, I think they're back now.
Okay, great. I was worried that something was wrong with my technology. Okay. Okay. Patrick, can you?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. Thanks. It's great that the technology is working after all. So, so just to resume very briefly, I'm happy to be here. I was at a meeting earlier with Gacere, and one of the things that we also discussed there is the power of collaboration, the power of radical collaboration. And this is really pertinent when we think about the global circularity roadmap. And I think it was also addressed by Stephen earlier, showcasing the role of governments, especially in this. And from my side, what I'd like to highlight is the important role of business in this. So as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, we lead the sustainability agenda for over 200 of the world's key companies, representing many diverse sectors. And circularity has been a growing space of importance for us, especially in our products and materials area. And I have a few colleagues that are joining. Actually, some are in Kigali, some are joining online and listening to the session. What we have done as part of our circularity work and through a consultative process, also involving Chatham House, which is exciting, we led a series of roundtable discussions led by business, but involving others too, on how to transform value chains. We did this in the run-up to Stockholm Plus 50, which was the major UN summit last year that brought together the nature and the climate agenda. And out of this process, there were 3 core recommendations that came through from business on how to transform value chains. And I'm just providing the brief overview on the 3 and then zoning in on the Global Circularity Protocol. It was about a global accountability framework, especially in the carbon space and climate agenda, but also moving into nature. And as you saw right now at COP27, the accountability space featured really high up, also with the HLEG report and Catherine McKenna's report on accountability. Then we also focused on a global reskilling initiative for jobs for the future in the sustainability space. And third, last but not least, the importance of a global circularity protocol from a business perspective. And what we are seeing, and this is a key point to make here, a growing interest and excitement from companies about the circularity space, and also diverse companies representing different sectors from around the globe. And they see huge importance of this. They see something akin to a protocol, doesn't have to be legally binding per se, as something that aims to remove common roadblock for businesses and SMEs. And this is especially important to highlight here, to basically disincentivize linear ways of working across value chains and to scale business models. And we can go on and on about common roadblocks, such as some international trade rules, possible high rates of consumerism, incentives for processing raw materials. And what companies made clear is that they're open and willing to engage in conversation, collaboration, and also test models that work. So what we're trying to do now in the next year is, number one, in our products and materials space, and we've done really exciting work there already, and I would argue that this Global Circularity Protocol is going to bring together a lot of the key work that's happening there, create some of the technical recommendations from a business perspective on how this could look like. How could such a protocol look like? And what we think and what we see as the really exciting space and how to collaborate with the work that Chatham House is doing is to really participate and engage and cross-pollinate on the work. Because the global roadmap process should be focused really on using and building on all the previous work that Chatham House, and not only Chatham House, has done, and finding ways on securing an inclusive circular transition. And obviously involving developing countries, small and medium companies, and they're using the research skills that exist. These are some of the big issues we see, and involving and including the role of business. And WBCSD can play an absolutely key role there, because really we need to have harmonized metrics and indicators so that we all speak the same language when discussing circularity. This point was already made, and it's something that all these conversations are leaning to. Harmonizing metrics, aligning around indicators. The other point that Patrick had made, and I'm keeping my contributions quite brief because I know we have a Q&A later on, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the other participants, was about how is WBCSD, why is the participation in the Global Circularity Roadmap helping WBCSD move forward on this work and on the protocol? And we think this collaboration is essential, especially with many of the challenges that our world is facing right now, especially if we want to address multiple issues around circularity. We really need to complement our work and complement our expertise and skills. Both initiatives were born at the same time, seek to work in the same space. So we need to avoid overlap and improve synergies. And we'll be really looking forward to active exchange, more coordination between the processes. Yep. Hello? Oh,
it's fine. Yeah, we can still hear you. You're still there. Keep going.
Okay, great. So it's really about complementary, not competing on efforts, and ensuring that the ambitious business voice is represented there. And that's my final key message in there: the importance of harmonization, removing obstacles, alignment, and making sure that business is part of the conversation is absolutely important in this. And we're excited to be playing a role in that. And yes, looking forward to the Q&A and brainstorming more on how to collaborate.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Claire. Yes, we see it in the same way. So there's cross pollination between the two processes, and actually many overlaps where we explore the synergies. And I also like the use of your metaphors about the roadblocks. So we need the roadmap so that and also what you mentioned about the fog. So we need the roadmap that we don't drive in the fog and hit the roadblocks, because then we lose speed, and that's we can't avoid that, or we should avoid that. As we heard today, time is of the essence in finding solutions globally. Okay, great, thanks. Please stay online and join also later with the Q&A. And now I'd like to hand over to our next speaker, who's also online. Takashi, are you there?
Yes.
Takashi Mitsushima, yes, great. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
From Geneva, that's right.
Thank you, Patrick, for that introduction. So can I hear?
We can hear you, we can see you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, my name is Takashi Mizushina. I'm currently with the permanent mission of Japan in Geneva, where I have worked as a Japanese government official for 15 years. And by far, the largest part of my 15 years of my work have been in the environmental field, particularly in the area of waste management. My work in African countries included attending TICAD in Mozambique. To answer the first question, why is the global circular economy roadmap process important? So I would like to introduce the regional circular diversity zone. So I would like to share the slide. Yes. So
we can see the slides.
Yes. Could you see the slide?
Yes, it's very clear.
Yes, thank you. So I believe the global circular economy roadmap process is a global transition movement, I think. So, and the regional circular diversity zone are part of this process because they suggest concrete ways on how to achieve a circular economy, especially in resource-poor countries. So to speak, the two in a relationship of global goals and regional realization measures. Neither of these should be lacking. So as shown in the image, and the initiative starts with the thorough search for service and resources that can be circulated within the region. So this answers my second question. What are the key issues global roadmap process should address? So I'd like to next slide. So I'd like to explain the example and tell you about where this vision came from. It is Japan 300 years ago. 300 years ago, Japan was ruled by 270 small various domains, all of which had one thing in common. In every country, there were people who were in the business of carrying poo. They collected poo from urban areas and carried it in the bucket to rural areas. Rural poo containers were called koedame, where the poo was aerobically fermented and used as a fertilizer for the fields. Those who collected and carried the poo received as a reward urban clothes, bowls, or vegetables from the countryside. I'm not sure where the buckets of poo were filled with vegetable. Sorry, it's joking. So if someone were to do this in Japan today, they would be stopped by the police. However, there is a fact that oyster shells emitted in urban areas are powdered and spread on rice fields in the rural areas, producing rice that is resistant to typhoons and marketed as branded rice from the sea's bounty with high nutritional value, like this. So finally, I'd like to explain how we're participating process, how our government to implement circular solutions. So the answer is clear. In relationship of global goals and regional realization measures. So neither of these should be lacking. So first of all, we can immediately share past successes. And I believe that publishing the global goals in my country will help people better understanding the importance of building circular economy. In addition to that, if it is possible, I'd like to borrow the stage of global roadmap process to demonstrate. It would be interesting to demonstrate it in the, for example, UAE at COP28. I have, frankly speaking, I have not yet got the approval of my boss for Mr. Hayashi, but I'd like to do it. So this vision was born in Yamagata Prefecture, a particularly resource-poor city in Japan 300 years ago, with real money and a few human resources. But it is difficult to understand. I just explained it. So if I can do, I would like to prove in other countries, especially resourceless country. Thank you all for your kind attention to the end. I will return the right to speak to Patrick. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Takashi. Yeah, no, that's great. So I think the wisdom of Japan will be really useful for creating also the future vision. So the 300 years experience also reminds us that circular economy is not a European concept, but it's been practiced by many cultures already in the past. And then obviously we know Japan is also very advanced in the circular economy today. So that's very valuable for you to contribute. And I'm also would like to also discuss the offer host an event at the COP in UAE on the roadmap, that's definitely a great offer. And I think we'd like to take you up on that and discuss further. Thank you so much. And so now we go back into the room. We have a couple of speakers. So there's Apuba and Josephine. Please come over, join us here on the stage. So Apuba is one of our partners in the executive committee from Circular Innovation Lab, Josephine Köhler with the African Circular Economy Network. And yeah, please take a seat.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for the kind introduction. And thank you, Her Excellency, Madam Paula, for such great opening remarks. I'm honored to be present amongst such a distinguished panel today and amongst such an engaged audience that is championing circular economy around the globe. Let me just begin by giving you all an overview of my intervention. I'm going to quickly talk about some of the key issues that this roadmap process is going to address, the importance of this roadmap, as well as how such a process could be valuable for an organization like us. Let me begin by saying that the triple planetary crisis that we're facing of climate change, biodiversity and nature loss, and pollution and waste is all a global externality. And global problems require global solutions. We just have one planet, and we just have the same planetary boundary, whether we're sitting in the global north or the global south. So I'd just like to say that when we're talking about the key issues that this roadmap process is going to address, firstly, we can already for sure know that we're going to be sharing some of the best practices and knowledge between the global south and the global north. We can all agree in this room that there is a lot of indigenous knowledge and best practices that the global north can learn from. Let me begin by giving you two examples, one from India and one from Ghana. In India, we traditionally eat on a banana leaf. It has naturally polyphenols that are natural antioxidants. It's fantastic for you. And I've seen an example in Ghana as well, where they use an ahaban leaf to package food. They're going back to the roots. This is just a point that I want to make, that there's so many practices out there and nature-based solutions with indigenous knowledge that do not require us to reinvent the wheel. It already exists, and we should make the most of it. And one idea that I just got being part of this discussion, Patrick, is as part of the visioning process, we should have a database or a data bank of these practices and these solutions in the roadmap process. Second of all, we spoke about standards and the harmonization of standards and indicators. And I feel like if circular economy standards are there, they need to be harmonized. There should be a mutual recognition of these standards if we don't want circular value chains to be disrupted. And finally, another key issue that it would resolve is basic framework of indicators. We just heard that there are 50 countries moving on to this process of creating national circular economy roadmaps. Almost 26 countries and cities have their own indicators. And how are we going to measure progress if there's so much fragmentation of indicators? We need to have a basic framework of indicators out there. Now, moving on to why this process could be useful to an organization like us. So we're working a lot with national governments in supporting them in national circular economy roadmaps. And as part of that process, we've learned that there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of fragmentation of things, and governments are demanding and requiring guidance on which focus areas to look at, which indicators to get out together So we're working with the government of Angola, with the government of Vietnam, and the government of Philippines. And with the government of Angola recently, we know that they are mandated by law to bring about a national circular economy roadmap by 2023. And they wanted to know what are the best practices of national circular economy roadmaps around the world. And we're collaborating with Chatham House on doing international best case practices study to help them in supporting in this vision. I'm gonna stop here, Patrick. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Apurva. And then, yeah, thanks for sharing those very practical experiences that you encounter in your work with government on advancing those roadmaps. And that's all very valuable. Also, it has also informed our decision to move ahead with this. Yeah. Okay, great. So now over to Josephine. Yeah, from.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack and Patrick, for giving me the opportunity to share a little intervention from our side. It was also very nice to have you in our accelerator session earlier in this morning, where we were mainly discussing the national road mapping process. So it's really great to be here now, because there's no doubt we have to align those processes in order to prevent these fragmentations as well you were talking about earlier. So I think this initiative, this global road mapping initiative, is a great initiative because it has really the potential to align the processes and visions on a global level for countries, for businesses. You were stressing that you're having a very much of a multi-stakeholder approach, which is very important. Just because we are talking on a global level, it does not only imply that we work with governments. No, it has to be all stakeholders involved. So, and this process can also really help to attract attention on the global level, because we still see, more and more people buying in and seeing the importance of developing roadmaps and making the step towards the circular economy. But there could be more commitment, right? So I think addressing this conversation on a global level in a streamlined way can really help to bring more people in. And it can also really help to stress the urgency, right? I mean, we all know this in this room, but we have to attract more people and organizations to really be part of this all. And lastly, I think it really can tackle very specific issues. And I'm going to refer to those that we faced in our roadmap development process on a national level. Because we at the African Circular Economy Network, its foundation, the African Circular Economy Network Foundation and Trinomics, so far we have developed 7 full or partial roadmaps for different African countries, with Rwanda and Ghana being the latest ones. So, and there, of course, we also face some limitation in some things that we can recommend. And one thing the main thing really relates to trade issues. So, and there are a few subpoints I would like to mention. So the first part is related to waste shipment. I'm not going by priority here, so don't get me wrong. I know we want to avoid waste, and we definitely also have to work on more upstream initiatives. But what we can tackle on the global level is definitely related to waste shipment. We already see restrictions in Europe that certain countries want to export waste in order to facilitate or enable a better treatment, which is then through certain regulations which are not yet aligned to this motivation, very limited and restricted. So it's lost potential in the end, right? So there are barriers that could be resolved through this initiative when it comes to enabling cross-border waste shipment. And also it could shed more light into this gray zone, because like a lot of waste, especially when we talk about the trade between more Western countries and the global South, a lot of waste is wrongly declared. And that leads to actually more problems on the ground in emerging economies. So this could be a great opportunity as well to align this. And then second of all, the empowerment of local markets, because related to trade, this is really important. I mean, when we right recommendations and actions in local roadmaps, we can say, well, you should work on your import and export standards and regulations. But if this is not considered in a more systemic level or in a more broader geographic scope, let's say interregional, let's start there, then it's very limiting. Because we had one example in Rwanda last year as well here, that you all know about the great initiatives in Rwanda here, but if there's still, for instance, plastic packaging being imported and partially be allowed, it does not really leverage and incentivize the production or the innovation around more sustainable packaging. So, there are very many limiting factors related to this. And when it comes to interregional trade, there are a lot of potential to really build on strength and competences and capacity, especially now, again, the example, Rwanda is a very small country. So, we should not expect that this country can deal with everything on its own. So it's really about finding those synergies with the region as well. And then lastly, I think that's a very important point as well, which you always nicely stress, mentioning the inclusivity, which is very important to bring in here, is to enhance the equity and inclusivity across the supply chains, which are most of the time global, which makes it even more complex and difficult to change. So here it's a great opportunity to bring in more transparency and pull into one direction altogether and really unify the stakeholders throughout the whole supply and value chains to change towards the circular economy and pull into one direction. Because even if you are a very ambitious actor in the supply chain, let's say textiles, which is highly complex and has a lot of shortcomings involved, especially in the very early stages, you cannot change too much because in the end, we all have to play together, right? You cannot influence what 2 or 3 actors did before. I mean, you could maybe advocate, but that does not change on the ground directly. So I'm going to summarize really quick. So I think overall the global process will facilitate the transition in many levels. And I also think it will provide important guidance for all the different stakeholders. But I also would really like to stress that it needs adjustment. So even if there's then this whole process developed and actions and recommendations being derived, stakeholders that will use it definitely should think locally or act locally. This is what I would like to stress. And the second point is definitely also that those parties that are still doubting and did not yet fully commit, that, that they better commit, because it might give them a confidence if there's a global community of 170 parties, which I guess it's still increasing, is committed to it. It might encourage many stakeholders as well to make the step and be brave and take the risk. Which is from our perspective not really a risk, but it might be perceived in some ways because it involves a lot of changes. And lastly, from our perspective, what it can bring or like what it can contribute to our work at ASIN and ASIN Foundation is to really help to involve more stakeholders on the ground. As you all know, we have a strong local network, so really bringing more in. And also, all the other diverse stakeholders we are working with on the government, civil society level, and so on, to really help to create the national roadmaps with a good feedback flow with the global ones or even regional ones, let's see, and to then build up an enabling framework for circular economy initiatives and business cases, which that's the long-term goal of us all, right? But we have to really work out well this enabling framework. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Josephine, for bringing the perspective from the African Circular Economy Network. And you've been growing quite quickly over the last few years. I mean, you mentioned trade, which is also very much something that we're interested in within the roadmap process. Definitely something that requires more international coordination. Then you also mentioned inclusivity. We want to be inclusive today as well, and also give you a chance in the audience to either comment, provide your views, or ask us questions. So we have a couple of mics to go around. So maybe just raise your hand, and there's one over there. Anybody on this side? Yeah, there, Boma, next. So we have one more speaker at the end. So Astrid Schumacher from DG Environment in Brussels is on standby. Who will close the event later. But first of all, over to you, Joost.
Thanks. And thanks for all speakers. Great content. This, I think, is a great way to close the conference. My name is Joost Kluiver, representing a bit of the private sector here today. I think it was mentioned to some extent already by the lady, so thanks so much for mentioning the practical side of circularity. I think what we're discussing today is very clearly going to support government policy, short-term and long-term. And definitely also in the long term, is going to support practitioners, companies. On the short term, I think there's still an opportunity for increased connection, because especially those that are currently working on circularity and learning, and with that experimenting and sharing knowledge, support the development of such a vision. In the last few days, sometimes it looked like there's either an interest on policy and creating a vision, or practical examples that are small scale. They can really reinforce each other. So my suggestion, or maybe request, would be to indeed make sure that there's a link between what is currently happening. Of course, also the private sector on a larger scale, but I don't think we need to worry about the voice of multinationals, especially those smaller scale organizations, making sure that what they learn, their innovations, are being included, so that the vision isn't only theoretical, it's based on what we currently learn in practice. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Joost. I think we definitely want to do this, have practical action or practical steps that will also benefit those smaller companies working on circularity right now. So Boma, over here.
Okay, my question will be, similar to the comment you just made now on learning. I heard about different stakeholders, governments, and also businesses. But then I was wondering about the role of the academia in this process. Because Jack, I remember you very well back in Strathclyde taking a class and mentioning triple helix and how it aids sustainable development, government, business, but then also academia, where those solutions are being curated. And we saw from the conference yesterday, working with the African Leadership University, those students came out brightly because they had guidance. So is there any plans to factor in, whatever outcomes or whatever decisions on the roadmap, and how that goes into academia? Starting from primary schools, secondary schools, all the way to tertiary institutions. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Boma. That's a very important point. And of the 170 organizations that have signed up, there are quite a few number of universities, different departments from covering different aspects of the circular economy. So, which is great to have them involved. But I think your point is important. How do we distill the learnings and bring this then also in the education system, or generate this more academic knowledge? Thanks for making that point.
Can I just also pick up on your point? So in addition to academia, traditional academia signed up, I think your point there, the more prescient point, was not just those in an ivory tower who have knowledge. It's all different types of educational areas. And that's not just confined to traditional universities. So that is our real priority, is to diversify that. We've had conversations with various youth groups, including UN Youth Group, but also waste picker alliances, informal sector alliances and cooperatives. We're really keen to get that voice front and center in the process. And that's not academic knowledge, but it's incredibly valuable and practical knowledge. So it's the many different types of knowledge that we need to harness. This 170 is an initial list that signed up in the space of what, 7 days? I don't know. But the real challenge is to make sure we get as broad a horizontal diversity of voices and knowledge into this.
Great. Thanks, Jack. Over there, yeah, Piotr.
Thank you, Piotr Barczak from the EEB. We are also one of the co-signer interested partners in this. It's a big challenge, and we know that those global signed documents or guidelines by many partners are difficult. And I wish really that we will, under your guidance, and we will all find common paper. But my question is, do you consider any protocol for monitoring and ensuring accountability of the governments that will be signing this or will be part of it? Is there any way to monitor? Sorry, there's some echo. Any enforcement process that you would like to suggest to hold governments accountable to what they will agree within this initiative? Thanks.
Okay, thanks for the question. It's actually the first time someone raised this question about accountability and enforcing. At this point, I don't think that would be part of it unless this emerges from the stakeholder discussions. But as we said at the beginning, it's not supposed to be additional obligations or something that should be done top down. But having said that, if something from the process emerges that will then be taken to the multilateral level, so that might then also include some of those mechanisms that you were asking. But it's not quite clear yet at this stage.
Yeah, and just to add, Piotr, thanks for the question. The real aim is of the roadmap is to find areas where people just really want to work together. It's the kind of coalition and cohort of the willing, finding areas for obvious mutual gain working together, which shouldn't require a stick and pushing. It's these collaborative areas across countries that I think would be the real gem in this. Yeah, and I won't any.
Stefan, is that something you would want to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming, I have spent 20 years of my professional life, maybe more, in a convention, and a convention, what you're describing with enforcement and so on, would require something like a convention. Conventions are picking up on popular concerns, but are in the end government driven. There's no direct road from popular concern and popular issues to a convention without the government route, right? So I'm sure Astrid is happy to provide more comments towards the end on this. Let me just use the opportunity. So that would mean the roadmap itself, without being mandated, I wouldn't see a conceivable way how that could be part of the roadmap, but of course, seeking such a mandate could be part of the roadmap. Let me just throw one more point in the discussion, which is timing. So let's say circular economy discussion has started somewhere, I would say 2014, 15, say 2015. From 2017 on, we have seen an acceleration. That's only 5 years ago. Your timeline is 3 years from now. I think we all have to be careful that our product, your product, but to which we can contribute, is not coming at a point when actually this very quick movement that we are seeing has rendered it obsolete. So the trick is probably a structure where you have interim guidance, because otherwise the world might have simply moved on. Just a thought to keep in mind. Thank you.
No, that's, yeah, definitely also something that we've thought about, how to provide current guidance, but also for the roadmap to have a shelf life, that it can be a reference point going forward as well.
Yeah, just to say very good points. We've got some questions. I don't know if you can read that, Patrick.
Oh yes.
You might need to go closer, but you want to pick up any of them before Patrick, before Astrid.
So there's various. I don't know which one is the question. Should I?
Yeah, good point.
I think these are mostly comments, but I think maybe the comment by Janja Krautmeier Mackenzie, who's saying that she expresses her congratulations on the development of the Global Roadmap Initiative, and thank you for inviting Slovenia. Yes, and so Slovenia has been